Hey, philosophy students. Hope you had a good weekend. I'm actually recording this on Friday night, so you'll see it Monday. Um, but hope you had a good weekend. And one of the things that I'm going to do, by the way, because you're all most of you are seniors, some are juniors. One of the businesses that's opening this weekend, actually, or this past weekend, um, I always had a good time, no matter how old I was the drive-in. We have one up in Pleasant Valley, up in Pleasant Valley, which is right near People's Forest in Barkhamsted and that area. And so one of the things that's neat about it is you can socially distance yourself in your car, yet you'll be out and about with a lot of people. It's kind of a neat thing. The screen, your movie experience is not what it is when you're looking at your phone or our high definition televisions, but it is cool. Like you're in your car, you listen to it on the radio, and you get the whole experience. There's a snack bar there. They kind of have old music playing. They usually have little cartoons in there. It's really a neat cultural experience. And during this time, you could see some of your friends and still stay a good amount from each other and have a good time. This past weekend, because I'm doing this on Friday night, so I keep wanting to say this weekend, but I know the weather isn't going to be optimal. But as we go forward, as the weather warms up, if it ever does, which it should, it really is a good time. Be careful. Make sure you have some jumper cables with you, just in case, because your radio's on, and you want to make sure that your battery doesn't die. And it's easy enough if you've got jumper cables to just get a jump start. Some drive-ins used to have people who would come around and jump start your car that had a guy actually work there. But it's not always, most of you would be fine if your battery's good. If it's a little colder out, some people start their car and let it run to the heat and things like that. The movies, the 10 o'clock movie is The Invisible Man. I'm not sure what the early one is. It's a cartoon of some kind. They usually do that for kids. When I remember when I was like in kindergarten and first grade, we used to go to, there was a drive-in, if you know where, what is the name of it there? Nardelli's is, okay, right in that plaza. There's a package store next to it. Behind there is a senior citizens home. And that actually was a drive-in called the Skyview Drive-In. So when I was a kid, I remember my parents bringing me there, and we would watch the first movie, and then we had blankets and pillows. We would fall asleep while the second movie came on, and they would watch the second movie, and then we'd come home. But it was cool. And I always looked forward to it. And it might be a way that you can get out of the house and see some friends and do it safely. But anyways, what I want to do tonight is kind of just look at some of those fallacies again. Okay, this one is equivocation, another cool word you can put in your vocabulary. And there's different versions of this, and it's essentially when you start using a word in a speech or a piece of writing, and you mean one thing when you start and you use it to mean something else when you're done, and you confuse the matter so that people think it's the same thing. I'm going to read you an example so you know what I'm talking about. James Monroe was a strong president. Therefore, when it comes time to preserve his house, we want a strong paint. Brand Z is being used. It's a strong paint befitting such a strong president. Therefore, use brand Z. So the idea was you have a strong president. What does that mean? He's popular. He stood up under adversity. He held the country together during the Civil War. What does that mean? And furthermore, what the heck does it have to do with a strong paint, right? What does that mean? What's a strong paint? Does that mean it's going to withstand? Probably it's going to withstand the elements of the air. Two different uses of the word strong, though. And you're not even really defining what strong meant in the first sense. You're assuming in both cases, but the strong is being used equivocally. And so what that can do is cause a lot of confusion and make a little connection in your mind that someone might use to manipulate you. It's done in advertising all the time. So that's equivocation. Another example of that is the following. We need penal reform, and we need it immediately. Our prisons are places in which the God-given dignity of a man is plundered. In fact, the great humanitarian Albert Schweitzer said, as long as one person is denied his essential rights and dignities as a human being, no one is free. Given the present conditions, ladies and gentlemen, neither you nor I am free. Okay? So this word freedom now is, in the one sense, being used talking about freedom of belief, worship, speech. Okay, it's used in its broadest sense to start with, and by the end, it means freedom means not being in prison. Okay, so this is done with freedom all the time. Freedom is this ultimate thing, and two different types of freedom. There's physical freedom, and then there's freedom to do something, right? And so those two uses of freedom there in that one little statement are used, and it's an example of equivocation. And you might miss that. It sounds good, right? It just flows. A third type of equivocation comes from relative words. Now listen to this. This is a little more clear, I think. Eisenhower was a good general, a good citizen, a good father, a good golfer, a good American. Therefore, he'll be a good president. Well, let's see. You may know some good generals. Well, not anymore, but back then we were a much more military-minded country. A good citizen, a good father, a good golfer, a good American. Okay, that does not mean you're going to be a good president. I think if you look back in the past, there's a lot of people that would be viewed as a weak president who was maybe all of those things. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily apply, and that word "good" is a real example of equivocation. It's not really well defined anyways, and then you use it to make a good president. People are like, yeah, he's done all those other things, so that means he's going to be a good president. Okay, it's a non sequitur, and does not follow. Okay, so that's used again all the time in politics and advertising. Here's another one called fustianism. Now, this you'll recognize too, and if you haven't heard it already, you will see it. So I know somebody who I talk to not consistently, but I talk to this individual a few times a year. I spend some time. I'm not going to tell you who it is, not somebody you know, but anyways, he's very simple, straightforward when he talks, when I see him. He's very opinionated though on Facebook. Okay, so when he posts something, especially something about politics, so let me read you what fustianism is, and then I'll explain to you what he does. Okay, I'm going to read to you a quote, and you tell me what the problem is. Okay, if we are to talk about void, then we must define it, and if we can define it, then it must exist. And if it exists, then it is a thing, for nothing that exists cannot be a thing, whether that thing be palpable or abstract. Definition predicates cognizance of intrinsic quiddity. And if one can ascertain quiddity, then one must also acknowledge ontology. And the acceptance of ontology invariably establishes satisfaction of the onus probandi. What? And it's interesting, ontology is a philosophical word. There's a lot of them, they're abstract. What did I just say? Okay, clearly what this is something that could be said a different way. You probably were following it at first, and then we got into gobbledygook. Okay, in other words, the individual used such big words that hoping that you would just be swayed by the vocabulary that the individual is using. Okay, this happens in education a lot. So many years ago, the word pedagogical was thrown around all the time. We need transparency in our pedagogical discussions. And if I said that to somebody that was a non-educator, what are you talking about? Transparency, maybe they would know. And pedagogical just means the process that you use to basically instruct students. But it sounds really good, right? And so the individual that I know uses these huge words when he posts these things. And he's really giving off an image of, I'm just above this, so high above this. He could say what he's saying in a much more basic way, but he wants to give off this image of being so educated and knowing. And it really, if you're interested in communicating clearly, doing that can actually cause a breakdown in communication, and it can be condescending, honestly, to use specialist language in a context when you don't have to. As a matter of fact, there are very, very, very smart people that can't bring their knowledge down to where it's actually something you can communicate. So at that point, you may have, so a lot of times in academic journals, for instance, it's a very specialized group that reads those things, because you need to be just up on all the vocab to be able to make sense of it. And so if you want to appeal to a larger audience and communicate clearly, you have to learn to take it to the next step where you communicate it in ways that people will understand. It doesn't mean, it's not necessarily that you are lowering yourself to do that, because if they have the chance or have the interest to learn those words, they could do that too. So it's kind of taking advantage of people a little bit. So those are some fallacies. Okay, those are some nonsense in everyday language that happens to obscure communication. Okay. So one of the things that I just want to switch gears, because we've been dealing with rationalism and empiricism. Okay. Now, rationalism and empiricism, one is the primary way that we have information about the world comes through our reason, can't trust the senses. Empiricism says the opposite, that the primary way that we get information about the world is through our senses. And that's pretty much how we know what we know. Okay. This idea of reason, this abstract kind of thing that we have going on, actually all of our ideas come from the senses. If you want to get into an extreme form of that, that's what it is. So the two sheets I'm going to give you to do. Now, I just uploaded some, we have to upload our lessons into PowerSchool, and you're just going to be graded either on exceeds expectations, meets expectations, approaching expectations, or you didn't hand it in. So that's how we're doing the fourth marking period, and we just want to keep you updated in PowerSchool. So that's all that's going to be. You're going to see the codes, and that's all that is. Anyways, when you get to the sheet, the first thing that they're going to ask you, because there's one for empiricism and there's one for rationalism. The first question is, how could you justify the notion that you are sitting in this class? Okay, now you're not in class right now, but let's say you're in front of the computer watching this. So that is the idea. How would an empiricist justify that? How would a rationalist justify that? What would they use as a way to answer that they have knowledge if they're sitting in class? An empiricist is going to answer that differently than a rationalist. Okay. The second one, how do you know that this is a circle? Same type of question. There's a picture of a circle on the sheet. How would an empiricist say that they know that that's a circle? How would a rationalist say that they know that that's a circle? Is killing wrong? Where's one for you? What does a rationalist say? What would a rationalist say? I know killing's wrong because. And then what would an empiricist say? I know killing's wrong because, and they would answer a different way. Okay. And then the last question is, why be an empiricist? Why be a rationalist? Why is it desirable to be that? So what's the benefit of it? What makes it easy? Figuring out real knowledge. What's the benefit? Why might empiricism appeal to somebody? What makes it simple? Same thing with rationalism. Okay. So there's 4 questions, 8 total. Just answer those. I think you'll define with those. Next time, I think I'm going to talk about Kant, I think, a little bit. And then we're going to get into Bacon's idols, which has nothing to do with food. But they're idols, and I'll explain what that is when we do that. So hope you had a good weekend, and looking forward to talk to you again. Email me if you need anything, okay? And we will see you soon.